society is constantly changing because people will live in it and our needs are constantly changing. This makes cities change, and I strongly believe that a good way to understand how and why they have changed is going back to discover their own story. This helps us to understand the past of the cities, but also their tendency to the future. I chose Lleida because it's the city that took me in when I started my university experience, and 3 years later, I feel that a part of me has been stuck here. The city has suffered many changes that are explained by some historical events or periods, and all of them have built up the Lleida that we all know today. The aim of this project is to see how Lleida has changed regarding her historical and functional needs. To analyze that, I have chosen two different zones, La Seu Vella and the River Zone. I invite you to come with me and discover them. The monument of La Seu Vella has a wide history, which has made it change a lot. It was constructed in 1149 by Ramon Berenguer IV and Ermengol VI d'Urgell. They had reconquered Lleida, which was the name given to the city when it was occupied by the Muslims, and to make this feat evident, they have decided to construct a huge cathedral on the top of a hill in the city.
Hem de recordar que Lleida va ser un enclavament musulmà fins l'any 1149, després de 4 segles llargs de domini àrab. Per tant, un cop s'ha produït la conquesta l'any 1149 per part dels comtes catalans i els templers, doncs cal mostrar d'alguna manera que hi ha hagut un canvi de cultura i això s'ha de fer evident. Per tant, una manera de fer-ho a nivell eclesiàstic és plantar una soberana catedral.
Here we can see a representation of the whole monument of La Seu Vella. This first part is the cathedral, which was one of the main worship temples, was the main worship temple of the monument. Next to the cathedral we can see the cloisters. These cloisters are considered one of the biggest cloisters in Europe regarding the Gothic architecture. Next to the cloisters we can see the tower. The tower is the main figure or the most representative figure of the monument, because if we come to Lleida, the first thing we will see at the background will be this tower. La Seu Vella had his moment of highest splendor in the beginning of the 16th century, during the Gothic period. But the good days for the cathedral ended with the most destructive actions that the city can suffer, the wars. The first wars that affected the cathedral was la Guerra dels Segadors, which converted the monument, which in principle was created for worship, into an army warehouse and a hospital. Even that seemed to be the worst episode for the Cathedral of Lleida, this was just about to begin. A half century later, the troops of the King Felip V attacked the city to control it. In order to take all the soldiers in, they invaded the cathedral and they converted it into a military quarters. In fact, today, we can still see some evidence of that construction. In consequence, La Seu was closed to worship, and it lost, from then on, its function as the cathedral of the city. This religious role was assumed temporarily by l'Església de Sant Llorenç, while the new cathedral at the center of the city was being constructed.
El gran canvi és haver perdut tot l'embolcall que tenien al seu voltant. Em refereixo al barri gòtic de la Suda, un barri medieval, gòtic per excel·lència, el més xic de la ciutat de Lleida. D'acord? A nivell estructural això perd el seu acompanyament, perquè avui és una catedral solitària d'auto turó. No és tal com estava a l'època medieval. Això a nivell estructural i a nivell funcional, evidentment, és una catedral singularíssima, perquè per la seva funció catedralícia, l'any 1707, en el marc de la guerra de de successió espanyola quan s'omple de soldats.
The military occupancy of the cathedral lasted over 2 centuries, and that walls even suffered another conflict, the Civil War, when the monument had been also used as a concentration camp. After the Francoism, the soldiers left La Seu Vella, and since that moment it has developed its cultural attractives, and nowadays we could consider it a live museum.
És el nostre referent visual per excel·lència. Si a tots els llocs hi ha un edifici, hi ha una icona que ve en aquella ciutat, en el nostre cas efectivament és la silueta d'aquesta catedral, perquè potser no serà la catedral titular de Lleida, perquè ho és la Seu Nova, l'altra catedral, però la Seu, la catedral de Lleida, dels lleidatans, és aquesta, és la vella, és l'antiga.
Today, La Seu Vella is willing to be a World Heritage Site recognized by UNESCO. But now, if we go down the hill, we will find another zone which has evolved throughout the history, the river zone. The city of Lleida is crossed by the river Segre, and this fact puts on evidence the relation that have one with the other. The river has always conditioned the urban model of the city, and that model has also influenced the river. It has been a route of communication in a longitudinal way, but it has also been a barrier in a transversal way. While it had the function to communicate all the towns and villages close to the river, it had also divided the city into parts. There had been several floods in the city during their history that had provoked the recurring demolition of the bridges that crossed them. But the episode that revealed the need to canalize the river were the floods in 1982. They had also decided to construct big walls at each side of the river to prevent that the water reached the buildings. The older bridge that we have nowadays is the one called El Pont Vell, which was constructed in 1944. The rest of the bridges and walkways were all done between 1993 and 2010, and they are el Pont de Pardinyes, Pont de Príncep de Viana, Passarel als Camps Elisis, Passarel·la del Liceu Escolar, Pont de la Universitat, Passarel·la de Maristes, and Pont dels Instituts. How people use that zone and how they do it now has also changed a lot. Many years ago, they used it as a means of transport or to do fishing. There were some jobs related to the rivers such as Aiguader, Rayer, Cisteller or Arenaire. Nowadays, one of the main uses of the river is to do some sport or walking. Apart from the physical uses, we can also take profit of the educational activities that the zone offers, as visiting el Museu de l'Aigua and la Depuradora de Lleida. The Segre River, apart from being a symbol of the city, it has given to Lleida a landscape which a priori is not expected to be found in a weather like the one we have in Lleida. This is el Parc de la Mitjana, a natural zone with more than 90 hectares located at the outskirts of Lleida. This is the part of the river that crosses el Parc of la Mitjana. This park has been recovered in 1985. El Parc de la Mitjana is considered a riparian forest, and that kind of forests normally grow in climates in a higher latitude where it rains a lot. In that case, the proximity with the river creates a kind of microclimate that gives room to that type of vegetation, and also to particular species that we shouldn't be supposed to find here in Lleida. Some examples are trees like poplars, ash trees, or animals like moorhens, green frogs, ducks, foxes, or grey herons. After doing all the project, I also wanted to know the awareness of the people towards all this change that both La Seu Vella and the river zone had suffered. To do that, I created a quiz with some questions related to the topics or the information that I have mentioned, and I asked them not to check their answers until they'll have finished. Some of the questions were: who was in command of the construction of La Seu Vella? When was La Seu Vella closed to worship and lost his cathedralistic constitution? Is La Seu Vella nowadays a World Heritage by UNESCO? How many bridges and walkways can we find in Lleida? Which type of vegetation can we find in El Parc of la Mitjana? The results were quite surprising because many people ended the quiz with the feeling that they didn't know well enough the city where they were living. Even a big part of the sample answered many questions correctly, they got confused in much others. The questions that had been answered the best were the ones related to festivities in the city or the War of Succession, which was a very significant episode. How the city of Lleida has changed was the question that started this project, and now I think that after doing the research, I could answer it regarding the three objectives. The first one talks about La Seu Vella, a monument that, as we have seen, has changed at the same time as the city evolved. We can explain many events that had happened during the story of Lleida just by regarding the monument, and I think that we can learn a lot from them. The other aspect that we have treated was the evolution of the river. This one really surprised me because I have never thought that the river could influence that much on the distribution of a city, but it actually did. It gave to the city a particular urban distribution that now has become a hallmark of Lleida. To complement all that information, I have decided to do some surveys. The answers, as I said, they have shocked me because I expected to get more right answers. Even the questions were a little bit tricky. In general, the results, they showed a lack of consciousness toward this topic. To conclude, I would like to add that for me, this way of working and learning the history of a place has been very enriching, and I believe that in schools, we should sometimes regard to our newer surroundings because the possibilities for learning are endless, and this fact is the real way to leave mark on the new generations. A mark similar to that one that left here all that people that during the centuries had been part of Lleida.